There's something strange about human beings. We put our faith in things we can't see. Love, gravity, electricity. But those three all leave behind evidence you can measure. You can test them, study them, flip a switch, and watch the light come on. Belief in God doesn't work that way. It's the one idea people are told to accept as absolute truth without seeing, hearing, touching, or testing anything at all. Just believe, and that alone should make us pause. Imagine this: someone tells you there's a dragon living in their garage, but you're not allowed to look at it, listen for it, or test in any way. Would you believe them? Of course not. You'd ask questions. You'd want proof. Yet when it comes to God, people are taught that asking questions is wrong, that even doubting is some kind of betrayal. But that's not how truth should work. The idea of God isn't universal. It's shaped entirely by culture. A child born in the Middle East will likely grow up believing in Allah. A child in India will be raised to believe in Vishnu or Shiva. A child in the mountains of Utah might grow up with a version of God who lives on a distant planet. These gods contradict one another. They can't all be right, but they can all be wrong. Most of us believe in our particular version of God not because of unique evidence, but because that's what we were raised with. If we had been born in another household, we would have believed something else entirely. That isn't a sign of truth. That's a sign of conditioning. Religion has never been built on discovery. It's built on stories. Stories passed down, mistranslated, rewritten by leaders, reshaped over centuries, and used as tools of control. Tribal gods became city gods. City gods became empire gods. And eventually they became personal gods, the ones people pray to before an exam or a football game. But the root is always the same: human beings inventing meaning to fill the gaps they don't understand. Thousands of gods have been worshipped throughout history. Zeus, Odin, Ra. Today, no one prays to them anymore. People look back and call those myths primitive. But remember, once upon a time, they were worshipped just as seriously as the gods people pray to now. What changed? Not the logic, only the culture. If God truly existed, not just as a belief, but as a real being, why would faith depend so heavily on geography? Why wouldn't we all share the same experience? No matter where we were born, truth should be universal. Belief in God is not. And that's the first sign that maybe we should start asking harder questions. People often confuse religion with morality. They'll say without God, we wouldn't know right from wrong. But that isn't true. Most of our moral principles existed long before religion. Don't kill. Don't steal. Care for others. These aren't divine instructions, they're survival strategies. Human beings learned that cooperation kept groups alive. Societies that couldn't work together collapsed. Morality didn't fall from the sky. It grew from the ground up, from people learning how to live with one another. Ironically, religion has just as often been used to justify the exact opposite of morality. Wars, crusades, torture, slavery, genocide, all carried out under the banner of one god or another. If a belief system can be twisted to excuse both compassion and cruelty, then it isn't a reliable guide for what's truly right. A principle that can justify anything ends up meaning nothing. Think about how we treat faith compared to every other part of life. Faith is praised as a virtue, as if believing without evidence makes you noble. But in any other situation, that would be reckless. You wouldn't trust a doctor who said, just have faith in this medicine. You'd want trials data proof. You wouldn't board a plane if the pilot said, I believe strongly we'll make it. You'd want training hours of practice results. So why is religion the one area where blind belief is not only accepted, but celebrated? Not because it's the best path to truth, but because it's the easiest path to control. From the time their small children are told stories about God, before they even understand what belief means. They're taught to accept before they can question. Then they're warned that those stories are sacred, never to be doubted. That's not faith. That's indoctrination. And at the heart of that indoctrination is fear. The fear of punishment, the threat of eternal torment. Believe this or suffer forever. That isn't an argument. That's a threat. Truth doesn't need threats to survive. Real truth should stand on its own. If something is real, it doesn't need fear to protect it. It just needs evidence. Now let's look at the way God is usually described: all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving. But the moment we compare those words to the real world, the picture falls apart. If God is all-loving, why is there so much suffering, not just from human cruelty, but from natural disasters, diseases, accidents, and birth defects. If he's all-powerful, why doesn't he stop them? If he's all-knowing, then he saw it all coming. The pieces don't fit. And when things don't add up, we have to be willing to say it out loud. Maybe we're holding on to an idea that simply isn't true. Some people try to explain away the suffering by calling it a test. But what kind of test kills children or leaves people with lifelong trauma? Others claim suffering builds character. But then why do animals suffer? Why do infants die before they even understand the world? They haven't learned anything. And if pain were truly necessary, why do we spend so much time and energy trying to prevent it? The problem isn't just that bad things happen, it's that people still insist a loving, all-powerful God is behind it all. The logic collapses under its own weight. When those contradictions appear, believers often shift the frame. They'll say human beings can't understand God's plan. That suffering is mysterious. But calling something a mystery isn't an answer. It's an excuse. In any other area of life, if someone gave you answers that vague, you wouldn't accept them. Imagine an engineer saying the bridge collapsed, but it's mysterious. Or a doctor saying your illness is part of a plan. We demand better explanations. So why do we let religion get away with lowering the bar? Believers also say faith gives life meaning, that without God, existence is empty. But meaning doesn't come from belief. It comes from living from what we value, from how we treat one another. You don't need a deity to love your family, to pursue knowledge, to laugh, to create, to be moved by beauty. All of that is available to every person, believer or not. Those things are real. They don't require faith. The idea that life is meaningless without God is deeply manipulative. It suggests that joy, love, achievement, and wonder are worthless unless some invisible figure approves of them. That's not meaning, that's dependence. It's emotional blackmail dressed up as philosophy. And when people say they feel God's presence, what they're often describing is something profoundly human: awe, gratitude, comfort in difficult times. But an emotion doesn't prove the source. Feeling watched doesn't mean someone is watching. People experience the same sensations in music and nature, in the face of someone they love. The human brain creates meaning, searches for patterns, and reaches for comfort. None of that requires the supernatural. It requires only that we are human. Belief in God persists not because of clear evidence, but because it's wrapped in identity, tradition, community ritual, and fear. It survives through habit and emotion, not reason. And that's why it's so hard to walk away. It's not just a belief in your head. It's a web of belonging, a sense of who you are. To let it go can feel like losing a piece of yourself, but in truth, it's shedding something that was placed there by others. No one is born believing in a God. That belief is taught, and if it can be taught, it can also be unlearned. Letting go doesn't mean falling into despair. It means seeing life with more clarity, recognizing its value, not because it's eternal, but because it's fleeting. Fragile things are precious. Knowing our time is limited is what gives each moment weight. Every laugh, every connection, every choice matters because it will never happen again. That urgency isn't depressing, it's empowering. You don't need faith in the supernatural to care about others. You don't need a promise of eternal reward to be kind. Most people who help others don't do it because of theology. They do it because they know pain, because someone helped them once, because they want a world where kindness is normal, not miraculous. True morality doesn't require heaven or hell. It requires empathy. Some argue the universe is too complex to exist without a creator, but that's not an explanation, it's a surrender. Saying I don't understand, so someone must have done it, isn't a solution. It's giving up on the question. The universe is filled with mysteries, but science doesn't plug the gaps with guesses. It asks better questions, it tests, it learns. And with every discovery, we've needed God less and less to explain the world. Lightning was once God's anger until we found electricity. Plagues were God's punishment until we found germs. Mental illness was possession until we found neurology. Each time, knowledge replaced superstition. The pattern is clear: as we understand more, the space for God shrinks. That's why philosophers call it the God of the gaps. But here's the thing: if a belief can't survive questioning, it doesn't deserve to be called truth. If an idea needs endless defense, reinterpretation, and excuses, maybe it's not truth at all. Maybe it's just a projection, a story people once used to make sense of chaos. Comforting, yes. Familiar, yes, but not real. And if the only reason to keep believing is fear of punishment, fear of being wrong, fear of the unknown, then that's not faith. That's coercion. A belief worth holding should feel liberating, not suffocating. It should open the mind, not trap it. Real truth doesn't hide behind fear. It stands on its own unshaken because it has nothing to lose. In many ways, the idea of God has become a placeholder, a stand-in for everything we don't yet understand or don't want to face. But we have better tools now. Curiosity, evidence, empathy. These are enough to build meaning, morality, and purpose. We don't need myths to guide us. We need courage. And courage matters because walking away from belief isn't easy. Religion weaves itself into family culture and identity. To question it can feel like betraying your roots. It can cost relationships, community, even a sense of belonging. That's why so many people cling to faith, not because it's true, but because it feels safer. Yet truth has never waited for comfort. It doesn't bend to tradition. It stands whether we accept it or not. The real world may not be perfect, but it is real. And that makes it more valuable than any fantasy. Every second becomes precious because it isn't guaranteed. Every bond feels deeper because it isn't eternal. This isn't a reason to despair. It's the very thing that gives life depth and urgency. Knowing we only get one life doesn't diminish it. It makes it burn brighter. We weren't handcrafted by a cosmic designer. We are the result of chaos, chance, and time. But that doesn't make us less, it makes us more. Every thought, every emotion, every discovery emerged from a universe that didn't have to give us anything. And yet here we are, conscious beings capable of love, creativity, and wonder. That fact alone is extraordinary. To build a better world, we don't need divine permission. We need human will, compassion, honesty, and the courage to face reality without hiding behind stories. That's not cold, it's brave. Because bravery isn't about clinging to comforting illusions. It's about seeing clearly and choosing to act anyway. There will always be people who hold on to belief no matter the evidence. But more and more are stepping back, asking sharper questions, and daring to live without delusion. And when you make that shift, something changes. You stop seeing life as a waiting room for paradise. You see it as the one chance you have. And suddenly that life becomes more vivid, more urgent, more worth living. Throughout history, religion has often rewarded obedience over thought, faith over evidence, submission over inquiry. But progress, the kind that reshapes the world, has always come from the opposite. We move forward when people dared to doubt, when they refused to accept answers, just because they were handed down with authority. Doubt, far from being weakness, is strength. It's the engine that drives discovery. Think about all the ideas humanity once held sacred. The earth was flat, disease came from demons, women were inherently inferior. Each belief lasted for centuries, protected by tradition and defended by faith. And each one eventually collapsed because someone chose truth over dogma. That same shift is happening now with belief in God. It remains one of the last great myths we still protect, not because of evidence, but because of fear. And fear is powerful. People fear death. They fear the possibility that life has no built-in meaning. They fear being alone in a vast, indifferent universe. Religion offers comforting answers: an afterlife, a cosmic plan, a loving overseer. But comfort isn't proof. A story that feels warm is still a story. And the more comforting it is, the more carefully we should ask why we're drawn to it. Our brains evolved to detect patterns even when none exist. That's what kept our ancestors alive in a dangerous world. Mistaking a shadow for a predator was safer than ignoring it. But the same instinct misfires in modern life. It makes us see faces in clouds, agency in randomness, purpose in accidents. It isn't a flaw, it's a feature of the human mind. But it explains why we're so eager to believe in invisible forces. Once those beliefs are repeated, reinforced by rituals, celebrated in community, and rewarded with promises of heaven, they become deeply ingrained. They stop being just ideas and start fusing with identity. Letting go isn't just about changing your mind. It feels like tearing out a piece of yourself. But that piece wasn't truly yours, it was given to you, taught to you often, before you could even think critically. And here's the truth: if something can be taught, it can be unlearned. And unlearning isn't emptiness, it's freedom. It's not losing meaning, but finding it on your own terms. Not in borrowed stories, but in the fragile, fleeting, and real life we get to live. You don't need a God to care about others. You don't need the promise of eternal paradise to choose kindness. Most acts of goodness in the world don't come from theology, they come from empathy. People help because they know what pain feels like. They give because someone once gave to them. They choose compassion because they want to live in a world where it's normal, not rare. That kind of morality doesn't need commandments carved in stone. It only needs human connection. Some argue the universe is too complex to exist without a creator. But that line of thought isn't an explanation, it's an admission of ignorance. Saying I don't understand it, so someone must have designed it, isn't science. It's surrender. The universe is full of mysteries, but mystery isn't proof of divinity. It's an invitation to learn. Science doesn't fill the gaps with guesses, it sharpens the questions. Every discovery from evolution to DNA to quantum physics has pushed the need for God further into the margins. Think about it. Once lightning was explained as God's anger. Now we understand electricity. Once plagues were seen as divine punishment. Now we know about bacteria and viruses. Once mental illness was called possession. Now it's studied by neuroscience. With every breakthrough, the territory of the gods shrinks. This is what philosophers mean by the God of the gaps. Wherever ignorance existed, gods were placed. But as knowledge expands, those gaps close. And yet belief persists, not because it explains things better, but because it was there first. It's like an old story that people are afraid to stop telling. But if a belief can't stand up to questioning, it doesn't deserve the name of truth. If a God requires endless apologetics, reinterpretations, and excuses just to survive, maybe that God isn't real at all. Maybe it's just a reflection of human fears and hopes projected onto the universe. And here's the key point. If the only reason to hold on to faith is fear, fear of punishment, fear of emptiness, fear of being wrong, then it isn't faith at all. It's coercion. And coercion can never lead to freedom. A belief worth keeping should expand your mind, not cage it. It should give you courage, not tie you to fear. True conviction should feel like fresh air, not a locked room. The idea of God has always shifted to match what people needed. In times of fear, God becomes a protector. In times of war, God becomes a warrior. In times of oppression, God becomes a judge. And when people want to escape responsibility, God becomes a scapegoat. It was God's will. It's part of his plan. These phrases strip away accountability. They teach people to accept suffering instead of questioning it. That's not morality. That's resignation. Religion often praises obedience as if it were the highest virtue. But obedience isn't the same as goodness. Following rules without asking why doesn't make someone moral, it makes them compliant. Real morality demands reflection. It asks, does this action reduce suffering? Does it help or harm others? But when rules are treated as sacred, people stop asking those questions. They replace empathy with ritual, compassion with compliance. This is how harmful ideas survive. If you're trained to believe that doubt is sin, then you'll defend cruelty as long as it's cloaked in Scripture. You'll excuse injustice if it comes from tradition. You'll prioritize purity over people. That's not morality. That's dogma in disguise. And dogma has always been the enemy of progress. History shows us the cost of this mindset. Laws shaped by religion have been used to deny women control over their bodies, to silence science, to punish people for who they love, even to justify killing those who leave the faith. None of that is harmless. None of that is peaceful. It's power dressed up as virtue. The danger is subtle. When people are taught not to think critically, they don't just lose the ability to question religion. They lose the ability to question anything. Blind trust can be redirected anywhere into politics, into propaganda, into manipulation of every kind. That's why indoctrination is so powerful. Once you accept authority without evidence, that obedience can be exploited for anything. But the truth is, progress doesn't come from obedience. It comes from the opposite. Every breakthrough, scientific, social, moral, began with someone asking, what if the rules are wrong? Every step forward has been fueled not by submission, but by the courage to think differently. And that courage is what belief, when left unchallenged, so often tries to suppress. Look back through history and you'll see a pattern. Every time we've questioned old assumptions, we've grown stronger. We once believed the earth was flat until brave minds challenged it. We thought disease was punishment from demons until science revealed germs. We assumed entire groups of people were inferior until moral progress forced us to rethink. None of these changes came easily. They came because someone was willing to face tradition with truth. Belief in God is one of the last great assumptions left standing, protected not by evidence but by fear. And fear is powerful. People fear death. They fear meaninglessness. They fear being alone in a silent universe. Religion steps in and offers answers in afterlife, a plan, a protector in the sky. It feels comforting, but comfort doesn't equal truth. A soft story is still a story, and the sweeter it sounds, the more suspicious we should be. The human brain is wired to believe. It evolved to see patterns even where none exist. That instinct kept our ancestors alive, better to mistake a shadow for a predator than to ignore it and be eaten. But those same instincts misfire today. They make us see intention in accidents, faces in clouds, signs in coincidences. It isn't weakness, it's how the mind works. But it explains why we're so quick to believe in invisible forces. And once belief takes root, community makes it stronger. Rituals, repetition, and rewards turn ideas into identity. Faith becomes more than a thought, it becomes who you are. Leaving it behind isn't like dropping a habit. It feels like losing yourself. That's why so many cling to it even when the evidence falls apart. But here's the freeing truth: beliefs are not you. They are things taught, passed down, reinforced. No one is born believing in a God. That belief is planted. And if it can be planted, it can be uprooted. What remains isn't emptiness, it's clarity. A chance to see the world without filters, without fear, without the weight of inherited illusions. It's not a loss. It's a beginning. Life doesn't need a God to be meaningful. It doesn't need eternity to be precious. Every breath matters because it won't last forever. Every relationship matters because it isn't guaranteed. Far from being depressing, that's what gives life its urgency, its depth, its beauty. Knowing that this is the only life we get makes it more vivid, more worth living. We weren't shaped by a divine hand. We emerged from chaos, from chance, from time. But that doesn't make us insignificant, it makes us extraordinary. Out of a blind universe with no promises, we became conscious beings capable of love, creativity, and wonder. Every thought, every discovery, every moment of kindness is proof that meaning doesn't have to be given from above. We create it here together. And if a belief needs fear to survive, if it collapses the moment you stop being afraid, then it was never truth. Real truth doesn't need defending. It doesn't need threats or promises of reward. It stands on its own. A belief worth holding should open your mind, not trap it. It should inspire you to live fully, not keep you waiting for another world. The tools we need, curiosity, evidence, empathy, are already in our hands. They're enough to build morality, to shape societies, to guide us toward progress. We don't need myths to tell us what matters. We only need the courage to face reality as it is. Because the real world, with all its imperfections, is still the most valuable thing we'll ever have. Every sunrise, every laugh, every connection is irreplaceable precisely because it's temporary. That's not something to fear. That's what makes it beautiful. So maybe the question isn't, what if God doesn't exist? Maybe the better question is, what can we do with the life we know we have? The answer is up to us. Build love, learn, create, and care not, because we're promised heaven, but because this one fragile, fleeting life is enough. And if you've stayed with me through this reflection, maybe it's already shifted something inside you. If it made you think even for a moment, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing where you're watching from. Stay curious, stay honest, and above all, take care of your mind.